I've seen a lot of talk recently here in the U.S. about the big lie. What is this phrase and what is its history? Because they did not win the recent election, supporters of Donald Trump now claim the election was stolen. His opponents have begun calling this the big lie. Mr. Trump has recently attempted to usurp this phrase, referring to the election results as the big lie. This phrase has a history darker than most would imagine, and I expect if they knew its origins, people would hesitate to use it. As a student of propaganda, I have sought its genesis, and I believe I found it in none less than Mein Kampf, the book written by Adolf Hitler. From his book.
But it remained for the Jews with their unqualified capacity for falsehood and their fighting comrades, the Marxists, to impute responsibility for the downfall to the man who alone had shown will and energy to prevent the catastrophe. All this was inspired by the principle, which is quite true within itself, that in the big lie there is always a certain force of credibility. The broad masses, in the primitive simplicity of their minds, more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths.
Ugh. Given how awful a person Adolf Hitler was, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised he was a horrible writer. Let me try to simplify this mess.
I accuse communists and Jews of using a technique called the big lie. This technique entails repeating an outrageous lie endlessly. The stupid masses will believe it because they would never have the audacity to lie so brazenly.
Clearer? Remember that Hitler wrote Mein Kampf for an audience. Anything the Nazis released for an audience we must consider unreliable. Only in internal documents and private diaries may we trust Nazis to express their real, authentic opinions. In some, they lie. They lie routinely, and in studying them, we must always remember that. The technique called the big lie doesn't work. Some celebrity could go on TV and say, 2 and 2 make 5, all they want, and no one will believe it. Lying only reduces the credibility of the liar. Hitler accuses Jews and communists of using this technique to undermine their credibility. It's a libel. This should come as a surprise to no one. Yet whenever the topic of propaganda comes up, inevitably some layperson will quote the big lie as if it actually worked. The phrase entered the vernacular because for 20 years, 1925 to 1945, Mein Kampf was a bestseller, and because people were foolish enough to believe its author. As Rod Serling teaches us, the tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicions can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own, for the children, and the children yet unborn. The big lie is a prime example of that radioactive fallout still being passed around 100 years later. But the big lie does work, I hear you protest. Trump supporters do believe the big lie that the election was stolen, or the deep state believes the election was fair. Both sides want to believe what they believe, and the actual results of the election are drowned in propaganda. To quote Goebbels, "There is so much lying going on that it is hard to distinguish fact from fiction. That is the best thing, so far as we are concerned."